There are people who you would work as hard as, you may work harder than. There are people you would read as hard as, or read harder than and study harder than, but they'll have the better result than you do. You're going to find yourselves in a situation where every box that needs to be ticked, every I that needed to be dotted, and every T that needed to be crossed, you crossed them. The question is, when it happens, you're going to ask yourself a question. You're going to find yourself in the position of Cain. To ask a question of, why did this happen to me? What did I do wrong? Is this just some mistake of mine? Or is this just a glitch in the universe? I ask both the good question, what can I change? What can I do to make it better? And I ask myself the terrible question, what did they do to deserve it that I didn't do? You will find yourself in such situations where you think life has given you an unfair card. When life isn't going well, we must look first within. We are more likely to find the answers within than without. So welcome to the final module of the Nebula Academy Term 1, where the theme of the module is pain, meaning, and the human condition. But this particular final module, we are talking about the man within. In the last two modules, we have spoken about pain as an awakener, the meaning in darkness, and the war within. So the war within is the last theme. Is the last module, and that's what we're talking about today. So we have had a journey, and we have explained what the abstracts are. What exactly is pain? How do you react to pain, which is suffering? How do you suffer? Nihilism and meaning, the two options you have when suffering. We have also spoken about the firefly effect, finding meaning in darkness. When things go bad, when things go hard, when you're not able to understand the next best step, how you can be still and look for the little glimmer of light that life shines. And we spoke about the use of community, of a brotherhood, of a sisterhood. We spoke about the things that are invaluable, the things that are transcendent, holding on to the things that can't be touched by the weekend hands of this world. And in those two modules, module 1, module 2, it almost seemed like the infliction of pain has always been external. Someone is doing something against you. We looked at the story of Job. We looked at the story of Viktor Frankl. We looked at the story of even myself, the speaker. What I went through, what they went through, and how they were able to make meaning of their suffering. And it is going to be a hubris statement to think that we do not have the ability or capability to inflict pain and suffering. And like I mentioned in the meaning in darkness, I had highlighted that when you're going through a very hard time, especially when you're from a dysfunctional family, which is one of the use cases we really detailed on, and I said the first thing that you have to do when approaching such very nefarious situations, especially by someone else, is to know exactly what not to do, because that person represents the image of everything that you shouldn't do in that particular context. So a drunken father should act as a representation that you stay away from alcohol, or you should be very careful with alcohol so you don't end up in the same pit as he is. The second thing we talked about was the awareness of the fact that you can be susceptible to the same disease. And I use the word disease here metaphorically because disease doesn't necessarily mean ill health, or it could be ill health, but it's the ill health of the mind rather. And that is where our final module is going to be on, where we are no longer afflicted by external sources. We are both the captors and the captive. We are both the offender and the victim. We are both the plaintiff and the defendant. We are both the Messiah and the sinner. I had given an interesting story at the beginning of the course, and I had mentioned in this story that there were two people, Martin Luther and King Henry VIII. These two people at the particular time in history, we are quintessentially examples, the paragons of morality. But over the years, they fell victims of themselves. They war with themselves, where they are both the winners and the losers. But what side wins and what side loses is left to them. So I will start this module with a particular story that we all are aware of. The Cain and Abel story. These, at least biblically speaking, are the third and the fourth set of individuals on earth. Now, I'm not going to argue whether that is across the world or across the earth, but biblically, These are the third and fourth characters after Adam and Eve that was mentioned in the Bible. Abel and Cain offered God a sacrifice. They both first understood that there is a God, which again, metaphorically speaking, an aim, a goal. They realized that there was a sacrifice that needed to be offered. Metaphorically speaking, responsibility, what you needed to do to achieve this goal and aim. But they both had different outcomes, and the Bible wasn't clear about why Abel had a better offering than Cain. But God's interaction or reaction to their sacrifices explains that he had a favorite sacrifice. And this again you see in your life. There are people who you would work as hard as, you may work harder than. There are people you would read as hard as, or read harder than and study harder than, but they'll have the better result than you do. You're going to find yourselves in situations where every box that needs to be ticked, every I that needed to be dotted, and every T that needed to be crossed, you crossed them, you dotted them. You have a goal, maybe a lofty one, but a noble one. And you're going to aim for it, work hard for it, make sacrifices towards it. And it may not be accepted. Not because you didn't work hard, just because that's how life is. The question is, when it happens, you're going to ask yourself questions. You're going to find yourself in the position of Cain. To ask a question of, why did this happen to me? What did I do wrong? Is this just some mistake of mine? Or is this just a glitch in the universe? Is there a better way to approach it? Or you find yourself asking a more different, why did this person get this and I didn't? Does he deserve it more than I do? And I found myself in the same situation when I gave the story about how I had friends, close friends, brothers, sisters, people I consider brothers and sisters, who we were all aiming for the same thing. They all got it apart from myself. And these questions I asked myself. I asked both the good question, what can I change? What can I do to make it better? And I asked myself the terrible question, what did they do to deserve it that I didn't do? And at that time, I saw myself torn between two worlds, the good and the ugly. The good meaning, try again. Critique the steps you took. Believe that there is a higher being that conducts and coordinates our life. The ugly being resentfulness, envy, jealousy, the tripartite enemy of humanity. You will find yourself in such situations where you think life has given you an unfair card. As Nigerians, we are already set back. At least that's what people believe. You have to do a whole lot to have equal fighting chance as counterparts in other countries. If you have not asked yourself this question, you may ask yourself in the future, what did I even do to deserve to be in a country like this? In a country as destitute as this? You find yourself in situations where you ask yourself, why am I in a particular social class? Why can't I be born into rich families? You find yourself asking those kind of questions, but you may also find yourself asking questions like, why did my father work hard enough to make sure that I wasn't born in this country? You see yourself asking questions like, why did my father work hard enough to be rich? You see yourself, if you're not careful, resenting the very people that brought you here on earth. When you face the war within yourself, you are both the judge, you're both the winner and you're both the loser. The only option you have is to choose who wins, who loses, and who is the judge. I spoke about Martin Luther, I spoke about King Henry VIII, and I spoke about the Pope. And the reason why I go back to this story every single time we talk about the war within, and I reference it with Cain and Abel, is that you don't have people who are indifferent about righteousness. You don't have people who are indifferent about morality. You have people who were epitomes of cultural values, societal values, and religious values. And those people were still victims of the cancer of the mind. The cancer that tells you that another man deserves to be beaten down because he is the reason why you're not succeeding. The war within. You will find yourself in a situation, and if you are siblings, if you guys have siblings, where one seems to be succeeding more than the other, the better place to be in is the one who is not succeeding. Because if you're the one succeeding, then you have enemies to deal with. But that's where Cain found himself, and that's where Martin Luther found himself, and that's where King Henry VIII found himself. Resentfulness. Now, I wrote an article called "What Do You Really Want?" is the title of the article. And I mentioned in that article is punctuated by the good, the bad, the ugly. And the question that I usually get when people read the article is, why did you separate the ugly from the good and the bad? And I tell people, the good and the bad are in the same team. They are consequences of each other. They're inseparably. Now, this is the thing. When you have a lofty goal, which is good, which we should all have, you should aim higher for something good, something noble. The bad is the consequences of pursuing such goals. The ugliness, metaphorically speaking, is the disdain and disregard for the noble pursuit of what is right, despite the consequences that may come out of it. When life isn't going well, we must look first within. We are more likely to find the answers within than without. And if we don't find the answers within, we must ask crucial questions. What can I do better to change the course of my life? What are successful people doing that I can do to better my life? In these questions lie answers that will enable us to make better sacrifices. It is not as you go through school and finish, you all are in the same grade. And that's one of the things about the educational system. It's very organized from the moment you enter school till you graduate. After a particular year, you graduate. After a particular year, you graduate. In life, it becomes chaotic. The guy sitting beside you who finishes from the same school at the same time, the same course, maybe even had a lesser result than yourself, can find himself doing well, and you, intelligent, smart, hardworking, they told you to come up with the first class, at least a 2-1, have fulfilled all the requirements to be good, to be great, and you are not good and you're not great. And they begin to ask questions. And sometimes these questions are not questions you can ask, because the moment you ask those questions, people begin to think that you are envious and jealous and resentful. So you ask yourself internally. But you're not going to be alone. How you navigate the answers or navigate the question determines the kind of answers you will get. So let's move away from the abstract to the practical. One of the stories in the Bible, again, this is a reference point because I read the Bible as a historical document more than a biblical didactic content when I'm trying to philosophize with it. You see a man, John the Baptist, who foretells the coming of Christ, the forerunner like they call him, who declares Christ the Messiah. And in less than 3 years, because Christ's ministry lasted for 3 years, begins to question the authenticity of the very man he called the Messiah. And all that happened because he was in prison. He had done some things he shouldn't do. Herod has imprisoned him. And he began to question if Jesus Christ, the one he spoke about and taught about, was the Messiah. How does a man go from being a cheerleader for another man to being the one questioning if the man he cheerled is genuinely the Messiah? We can draw a lot of spiritual or theological lessons from it, but I'm not trying to draw theological lessons from it. The question is what exactly changed in the life of John the Baptist? The same question we can ask Judas, part of the 12. Suddenly you had the need and the urge to betray your Lord and Savior. The answer to the question is that falling into decadence is a slippery slope. That's the answer. And that is why the war within is an important topic. You have to be able to be aware, very much aware of the evil you can commit. That's number one. Remember that. You must be very aware of the person you can be. Put in the corner, in the dark places, what you can do. I've asked the question. And the question is, if you're driving a train and the train has no brakes and you have two options, your loved one on the left, 5 people on the right that you know nothing of, what choices are you going to make? We all agreed that you're going to take the right. You don't mind killing 5 people to save your loved ones. And obviously that is the right thing to do if there are no other options. But the question is, if I asked you, what is the cost of 5 lives to 1? You say, no. 5 people shouldn't die because of 1 person. It's better 1 person dies because of 5. But by the time I begin to throw in different context and colors into the question, then your answers begin to change. And that's not to mean that you're a bad person. It just means that you're a human being that has the ability to be bad. So when we pride ourselves with moral superiority, I can never do such a thing. Can you never do such a thing because you have never been put in a situation where you can never do such a thing? A question that plagues the mind most times is, are you humble or are you humble? Is your humility because there are no opportunities for arrogance and hubris? Is your kindness because there are no opportunities for being mean? Do you have the right value systems that can stand the test that life throws? So let's be practical. Like I said, it's an incline. The first is to know that you can commit such a crime. The second, which is more important, is accountability, which means the moment hatred slips into your heart, and it can, and that's one of the things that God does with Cain. God tells Cain that sin stands at your door because he understood that Cain had first the ability to reject the sin at the door or to act it out. So number 2 is accountability. The moment you have this evil thought, this thing that is not right, this thing that you know that is questionable by several standards, the question becomes, what are you accountable to? To yourself or to a system that cannot fail under stress? Friedrich Nietzsche has a quote, highly misunderstood, but very true. He says, God is dead and we have killed him. And that became one of the most important quotes of the 19th century, Because what Friedrich Nietzsche was saying was that the standard for morality we have defeated as man, not that God in himself is dead, is that the things that holds the society together in terms of moral values and societal values, we are beginning to personalize it. Because what that means is you cannot be both the law, the enforcer of the law, and the one who is supposed to act according to what the law has said. We all have standards here that we have broken. We all have principles that we have broken. And if you don't have a standard or a system outside yourself that can check you, you fall into one sin and then yet another and yet another, and then you find yourself in hell. First step, understanding and agreeing that you have the ability. Your susceptibility to wickedness, to evil, to doing things that are not nice. Number 2 is the accountability. Number 3, which is even more important, is forgiving yourself. The forgiveness of self is important. I find it difficult to know the difference between the betrayal of Judas and the denial of Peter. I find it very difficult to see the difference because at the end of the day, Christ ends up getting crucified. But one of them understood, which is Peter. Yes, what I've committed is a great sin. If I can ask for forgiveness, because I've seen this man forgive the prostitutes, I've seen this man forgive tax collectors, the wicked people among us. If I can first understand that this is something wrong that I have done and seek the right way, panacea for it, then I'll be better off. But Judas, on the other hand, falls victim of self-pity. Not only was he an offender, he was also a victim. So forgiving oneself is important. The reason it's important is, whether we like it or not, you're going to sleep in that line. You're going to have a principle you break. There is a particular code you won't be able to maintain. And it's going to happen. And when it happens, you have the accountability structure, those people who can help you back up, who can help you, who can let you know. This can be people or systems. But more importantly, you must learn to forgive yourself and say, well, at the end of the day, I'm a human. Quoting Paul the Apostle I think he said this somewhere in Romans, where he said, what I want to do, I don't do. What I want to do, I don't do. What I don't want to do, I see myself doing. Oh, who can save me from myself? Something around that line. And that is a very interesting proclamation to make for someone like Paul. Because Paul didn't just become a Christian, he fought against the very gospel he ended up preaching. Number 1, and there are many other things you can do for the world within. Number 1 is to realize the duality of yourself. That you are susceptible to the dark side. Number 2, accountability. And number 3 is to forgive oneself. Now we are going to go into the second part of this. And we're going to talk about culturing the good part and killing the bad. We're going to talk about how we can flame and encourage the good side despite all attempts to bring out the bad side. And then we'll talk about how we can keep the bad at bay, and we'll wrap up the term. So we have one more part of this particular module to wrap up for the term. But for now, I hope you're able to understand all we have said from the beginning up until this point. So thank you all so much. I will see you in the next module.